he has inherited an institution for which he still needs to formulate his own strategy to respond to the issues that are highlighted in the State of South African Cities report.
Is his plan, his 10-step plan, one that is realistic and achievable?
He focuses more on the immediate issues, which I think is a good thing, but on its own is not sufficient, because managing a city also requires that you are growing a city. And in the instance of Johannesburg, you are managing a city now, which is also equally growing. So those two things are happening at the same time. And they need attention simultaneously and more or less with the same level of effort. I think the mayor still has to think about the future, the long term. Those are the kinds of things that I think the mayor still requires an opportunity to address himself to and articulate what his strategy is going to, how his strategy, which he has based it on 5 pillars. So in those 5 pillars, the question is, how do you then move from the immediate into the long term? And I think that's not just the problem of Johannesburg. That's the problem of local government in South Africa generally for the last 15 years. How do you create jobs? How do you make sure that there's financial sustainability? And those are the long-term issues for me.
Now, when he came to office, he made a promise, a vow, which was to clean up the city. Corruption, drugs, and poor service delivery. Has he managed to deliver? I
think it's too early to make the call. He does say that he's working on a script that was written by the previous administration. And so I suspect he's also insinuating that he should not be judged by what he did not script in terms of a strategy. Do remember, though, it's not what you do, it's how you do it that matters. And that, for me, is what will differentiate the past administration to the current administration. The style, the approach, and the posture that the current administration assumes should be what differentiates it from the previous administration.
Now, let's talk about economic growth. He has put a very, very big number. He's actually pushing for 5%.
Yeah.
In a very short space of time.
Yeah.
Is it an achievable number? Bear
in mind that the speech is being made in the context of a very difficult global and national economy. I mean, it's the issues of growth cannot only be addressed by a municipality, a Johannesburg, all on its own. Our system of governance is very interdependent. So part and parcel of what's going to be required for him to be able to meet the 5% in 4 years, by the way, because that's what it is. It implies he's going to have very good relations with provincial and national government, because they are the ones that are the policy determinants and the administrative determinants of what's going to happen on the ground. 2, it also implies that you have a very good relationship with civil society. And I think previously, and he says that in his speech, that he's not the most popular person. And so he's not had a very good relationship, I think, with the other spheres of government. Unfortunately, he has not been immediately well received by civil society. He speaks, thirdly then, which is the third thing that you need, a very good relationship with the private sector. He comes from the private sector. He speaks fondly of the private sector, but I think it's still to be tested that he's got a good relationship with the private sector. And again, I think he still needs to be given time to deliver. As I'm saying, it's going to be difficult to deliver 5% economic growth in 4 years, and I think I'm looking forward to that case study. You know, it's something that I think academic institutions would love to see happening.
Now, one of the issues that was left out in the speech was the issue of renewable energy. We're talking about the eco-mobility issues. Why do you think that is?
I have no idea, and I would loathe to think that that's not part and parcel of his priorities. I mean, it will be extremely hurtful. I mean, 2 years ago, you had the Paris Agreement on climate change. That was further rectified last year towards the end, but there was also the United Nations had endorsed a financing mechanism But importantly, all these global and continental and, in fact, South African local institutions that are responsible for policy have all endorsed the fact that local government must be at the center of delivery. And they have, in a way, put in place a set of agenda items. One of them is the response to climate change and creating a sustainable world. It's a pity that it's not reflected in his speech. I hope it's an error, and I hope that when he articulates his 5-year strategy, the issue of environment will come back.
Say you're the advisor to the mayor and his administration team. What would you tell him?
Reports indicate that South Africa's gap between rich and poor continues to grow, so the gap needs to be closed. How do you close that gap? You have to engage in spatial transformation. You have to bring people back into areas of efficiency, make them live closer to where they work, make them feel included in the city, not excluded. There's no point of continually developing poor people where they are, when in fact what you're really supposed to be doing is to integrate society, make it cheaper and more efficient for the worker that works for someone that is rich to be at work efficiently with less costs, in other words, transportation cost amongst other things, but make them feel humane. And I think for me that is more important. I think that will be the outcome of what any South African city ought to be doing.